Which of the Carolina Panthers newcomers needs to make the biggest impact in 2024? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Typically, but right now we are in off-season mode, meaning you're going to get episodes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays through the month of June and halfway through July. Then we'll be back to Monday through Friday, your team every day. That still is the motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where still on Fridays, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions all throughout the offseason. So either at me or DM me. But of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. Alrighty, so big news coming out on Monday about a potential stadium renovation here in Carolina, which obviously it's important as fans. You want to know what the stadium's going to look like, what the future of the building is, also what the future of the team is here in Carolina, which I don't think has ever been in question, but people like to scare themselves into something that's not realistically going to ever happen, but I guess it's still a possibility, even though it's not. We'll get into all that later on in the show. Let's focus on things that are actually on the field and will have an impact on whether the Panthers win or lose. A new Jumbotron, a new stadium facade, all that, LED lights, ain't going to change the product on the field. May be a better fan experience, better for the events that they have outside the Panthers games, Charlotte FC, but it has nothing to do with the actual on-field product. So speaking of the actual on-field product, Panthers, after a 2-15 season, need to make a lot of changes this offseason. They did that by hiring Dan Morgan as a general manager, brought in Dave Canales as the head coach, also brought in Brant Tillis as the EVP of football operations, and they brought in a host of different players on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball this past offseason. So on today's show, let's look at three guys on offense and three guys on defense who I feel like need to make the biggest impacts in 2024 for the Panthers to turn around from being a 2-15 team to being a team that's competitive. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team. I would doubt that'd be the case, but a team that is competitive and headed in the right direction. Starting off offensively, as that was clearly the one area where the Panthers had to make some significant changes, and they have done that. Starting off for me, really, outside the line of scrimmage, wide receivers, why they need to make a change. They need to make some additions because there's guys last year who just did not perform at the level they were expected. DJ Chark was one of the big free agent signings just based off what the Panthers' needs were last offseason, which was, again, wide receiver and what they were able to do. Brought in Chark. We're expecting him to be a deep ball threat. A lot of the plays that were made at Wofford during training camp were not made during the season, and he was complete and total bust for Carolina. Enter Deontay Johnson. The Panthers are going to get rid of Dante Jackson. They decided, let's go ahead and trade him to Pittsburgh. Also, send a 6th-round pick, get Deontay Johnson back, and a 7th-round pick. So effectively, they got rid of a player who they were already going to let go anyways and got back a starting wide receiver and only swapped a 6th for a 7th-round pick, which ended up being Michael Barrett, the linebacker out of Michigan, who's going to be potentially a special teams ace here in Carolina. Deontay Johnson fits everything Panthers needed. They needed a true, well, I don't know if he's a true number one, but they needed an X receiver, someone who is an elite route runner, someone who can get open and who can make plays. And he has done that in his career as an all-pro returner, as a Pro Bowl wide receiver a couple of years ago. And last year, PFF had him graded as the 25th best wide receiver in the league. His receiving grade was 23rd of 126 wide receivers that were eligible, according to PFF. Looking at separation, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. 2.9 yards of separation last year, 5 yards after the catch, 58.62 catch percentage last season. Looking back to his Pro Bowl season a couple years ago, he averaged 3.2 yards of separation, 5.1 yards after the catch, and had a 63.31 catch percentage during that Pro Bowl season when he still had Ben Roethlisberger as his quarterback. The last couple years, Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph have not gone as planned for Deontay Johnson, who still is a talented player, but a player who needed to be in a better quarterback situation, which is the hope is that will be the case here in Carolina with Bryce Young coming back for a second year, having shown some glimpses, not nearly as much as we needed to see last year, but we've already been over all the reasons why that was the case, along with maybe Bryce not being the guy. But compare really his separation and his stats to what DJ Chark gave the Panthers last year. It's not comparable. Chark was among one of the worst receivers in the league when it came to getting separation, only averaged 2.3 yards per game. That's not good enough at all. The Panthers getting an upgrade at wide receiver in Deontay Johnson, who Dave Canales has come out and said he's going to be our X receiver. He's going to be our first read. He's the guy that we're trying to get the ball to in the pass game. So opponents know that. And the Panthers got to execute it. But Deontay Johnson is somebody who's a true professional who can help out Bryce Young, can be able to aid Adam Thielen, who played excellent in the slot last year for Carolina, having 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 4 touchdowns, and can give a guy like Jonathan Mingo some time, and Xavier Legette. I don't know how to say his last name at this point, guys. So I'm just bear with me. Don't send me anything. I've seen it all. Don't send me anything. Don't need to hear it. But yeah, Xavier Mingo, 2 young guys. So having Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen a part of it as well, that's a good thing for the Carolina Panthers. Now, outside of just getting a wide receiver, the Panthers need to do something on the offensive line, and they have done that by investing $89 million in guaranteed money to the 2 starting guard positions. Damian Lewis coming over from Seattle to start at left guard this year, and Robert Hunt coming over from Miami to start at right guard. Neither one of these guys have been Pro Bowlers. Doesn't really matter. They have bulk, great size, both of them weighing over 330 pounds, great on the ground as far as run blocking, great in pass blocking, and 2 upgrades over what Carolina had to deal with the last couple of seasons. Brady Christensen, solid player for Carolina in 2022, but last year, only got to play 1 game, but still, even that 2022 season, he was the lowest graded offensive lineman on that group. And then last year, the fact that 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards, needed to find somebody to bring in some continuity and to bring in some more talent and experience at that spot, and they've done that. And the Panthers are really going after the Drew Brees model of how New Orleans built their roster by having a ton of bulk there in the interior. Got Lewis, got Hunt, moved Austin Corbett from right guard over to center. So they are going to be able to, they're hoping, at least the plan is, be able to protect Bryce Young up the middle. It does not matter whether it's Bryce Young or Josh Allen or Tom Brady to Pat, any quarterback that gets pressure up his face is going to struggle, but especially having a smaller quarterback like Bryce Young that's an area where the Carolina Panthers certainly are concerned about being able to protect him there on the inside. So Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt kind of combine those 2 as players that need to make big impacts in 2024. Then the last one, looking on offense, it's Ja'Tavion Sanders. I looked at the rookies and I wondered, of the 3 that were taken in the draft, which of them really needed to make the biggest impact offensively in 24. Obviously, Xavier, you would want to see him come out and play at a high level, but with Johnson and Thielen here, he's going to be the number 3 wide receiver. Doesn't have to have a major impact for Carolina to have success this year. And looking at Jonathan Brooks, we'll see how he's able to bounce off of his ACL, and I've said it, I believe whenever he's healthy that this is going to be their top running back in due time. May not be at the beginning of the season, but as the season goes along, I do think he'll end up being RB1, but more of a 1A, 1B role, or 1A, 1B kind of distribution with him and Chuba Hubbard this upcoming season. So really, the one spot where I feel like they actually do need a rookie to step up, that's Ja'Tavion Sanders at tight end. Last year, looking at the Panthers tight ends, they combined for 59 receptions, 561 yards, and 4 touchdowns in 2023. Looking over at Dalton Schultz, who was a free agent last year, signed with the Houston Texans, he had 59 receptions by himself, 635 yards, which is more than the Panthers tight ends, and 5 touchdowns all alone. So he had the same amount of receptions, more yards, and 1 more touchdown than an entire position group in Carolina last season, just to illustrate just how bad it was in Carolina last year. And that's not one of the best tight ends in the NFL. We're not talking about George Kittle. We're not talking about Travis Kelce. We're not talking about an elite tight end. We're talking about a good, very good tight end, but not one of those top tier guys. Can Sanders give you that as a rookie? I don't know. But down the road, you're hoping that he can do that. And you're also, I don't think you ever want him to necessarily have 1,000-yard receiving season. Like, it would be nice, but you don't want that to be something you have to rely on like the Panthers did when they had Greg Olsen, because the receiving talent wasn't that great. You're hoping the receiving talent, it will be upgraded, will perform, but you can also have a tight end who can give you something like Dalton Schultz gave the Houston Texans last year and also has given the Cowboys early on in his career. So Ja'Tavion Sanders, I'm not expecting him to come out and do a ton as far as have those numbers, but if he can make that kind of impact, that would be huge for the Panthers to be able to have Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen coming here, bring in Xavier, have Mingo coming back, and then also to be in a situation where they have a running back in the backfield like Jonathan Brooks who can catch the ball, but also have a pass-catching tight end to be able to help supplement that group that has not been able to do that over the last couple of seasons. So those are the guys I'm looking at who I feel like need to have the biggest impact on offense in 2024 for Carolina to take a step from being what they were last year to being what they want to be in the future under Dave Canales as their head coach. So that's the offense. What about the defense? Which three defensive players am I looking at? I'll tell you here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. The NBA Finals are set. You got Luka and Kyrie versus Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Dallas versus Boston. Cannot wait to see how that matchup goes down. Also, Stanley Cup got the Florida Panthers back at it again, and they're playing Edmonton, I believe. Don't follow hockey. Probably should have looked that up before I did this read. Either way, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We talked offense. Let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball and see which three players I believe need to make a big impact this year. One guy I'm going to exclude from this conversation because it's so freaking obvious, and the ones that I just talked about, like Deontay Johnson, Damian Lewis / Robert Hunt, who are, of course, individuals, but looking at the guard spot in particular, those are also ones you could say are very obvious. But Jadeveon Clowney, let's just exclude him because, yeah, obviously an edge rusher who is coming in to replace Brian Burns, who is a hometown guy, who was a former #1 overall pick at a premium position, getting paid premium money to be able to play that position, at least for this season in Carolina. Yeah, very obvious that he needs to make an impact, especially for a pass rush that was among the worst, was actually the worst in the NFL. And I think I've been pretty transparent, my belief, and we'll talk more about it once we do our position breakdowns. I just don't really see how they're going to get that much better. They weren't great even when they had Burns last year. You bring in Clowney, you bring in a DJ Woolen who's injured and not even able to go out through the offseason program right now, might not be ready to go for training camp. Just don't think it's going to be a good pass rush, so don't really want to waste too much time talking about how Clowney needs to be important when I think the pass rush is going to be terrible again this season. I hate to say that, but there's three other position groups that I'm looking at and three other guys that I'm thinking that really do need to make an impact to honestly be able to take some pressure off of Clowney to be the guy who has to do everything, especially when it comes to rushing the passer. But let's look at three other guys that I'm looking at in positions that I think really are important that the Panthers need to get the best out of them, just knowing that there are some questions certainly on the defense after watching all the departures that happened so far this offseason. A'Shawn Robinson, first guy I'm looking at. Defensive line was low-key a massive problem for the Panthers last year if you were not named Derek Brown. Shai Tuttle, big free agent signing, like all of them, aside from Adam Thielen, was a major disappointment last year for the Carolina Panthers. So he's got to be much better this season. Deshaun Williams, who came over from Denver, followed Jero Vero and Dom Capers to be a starting defensive lineman. He also was not good. He's now in Buffalo while Shai Tuttle's back, mainly because of the contract structure. Thank you, Samir Suleiman and Scott Fitterer, for that. They needed someone to come in to help this team on a defensive line, to help out Derek Brown. They went out and drafted someone in Jaden Crumedy, of course, but before they did that, they signed A'Shawn Robinson to a deal. And really, when I look at A'Shawn Robinson, I look at him as a guy who's got to help the Panthers up front stop the run. They were awful against the run last year, 31st run defense according to EPA, expected points added. They were brutal. The first 6 weeks of the season, the Panthers gave over 130 yards on the ground to each of those opponents, which is bad. very bad. And we saw even later on in the season against Green Bay what Aaron Jones was able to do just in a quarter, but that entire game, they struggled to stop the run. And getting someone like A'Shawn Robinson, who is a known run stuffer, to pair with Derek Brown and hopefully get more out of Shy Tuttle this upcoming season, that, in my opinion, is an upgrade from what they got from Deshaun Williams last year. Looking at A'Shawn Robinson's run defense grade last season, he had a 60.6, which was 49th out of 137 players in the NFL there at the interior defensive line position. Deshaun Williams had a 46.1, 104 out of the 137 qualifying interior defensive linemen. So a massive upgrade just looking at that, to have A'Shawn Robinson come in. And for this team to have success, like obviously they need to be better on the offensive line, need to stay healthy on the offensive line, but defensive line, that's important too. They paid Derek Brown a lot of money, but he's only one guy. He can only do so much, as we saw last season, where he had a Pro Bowl season, and still this run defense was not very good, in large part because Deshaun Williams and Shy Tuttle, they were not good. So the Panthers really need A'Shawn Robinson to hit this year, unlike Williams last year when they really struggled against the run. Another reason why I think the Panthers were not great against the run, they were missing Shaq Thompson. Now, Frankie Louvu, he was outstanding, of course, but Frankie, unfortunately, is no longer here. Shaq is coming back, and to replace Frankie is Josey Jewell, who is a veteran, having played in Denver the last couple of seasons, been a pretty solid linebacker so far in his career, and had one of the best years of his career back in 2022 when he played under Ejiro Evero in this same defensive scheme, having a career-high 128 tackles. Each of the 3 seasons that he's been healthy, these are the last 3 seasons, he's been only healthy 3 of the last 4. He's had over 100 tackles, which you can sit here and be like, well, yeah, I mean, they played a ton of games. That should happen. Remember Jermaine Carter Jr. Remember some of the guys that the Panthers have had. Tahir Whitehead, sorry, number 52. We don't say his name on the show, even though I just did. Those guys struggled mightily. So we have seen the importance of linebacker play, and some of the guys that were either drafted here or brought in free agency and who have flopped. Josey Jewell coming in with already an understanding of the defense, but also a guy who has shown that he can be a tackling machine paired with Shaq. Hopefully both are healthy. Like that can help mitigate the loss of Frankie Louvu. I've gone over before at a previous show. You can go back through the whole Rolodex of on YouTube and in the podcast feed and probably find it where I talked, and I'll talk about it again at some point in time as well when we do the position breakdowns, just how it's going to be still difficult to replace Frankie in certain aspects at the linebacker spot. But as far as stopping the run with getting Shaq back as well, this can really help. So having Robinson there and then Josey Jewell and Shaq Thompson to come back and to clean things up for them, I think that's a good spot for the Panthers to be in as long as they stay healthy, but they really also need him just to produce when he's out on the field. So Josey Jewell, I look at him as another guy on this roster who's a free agent who just came to Carolina this offseason who really needs to step up and to fill what I think is a pretty big void, not having Frankie Louvu, but he's a veteran who has done it in the past. The last guy I'm looking at is Dane Jackson. I have a lot of concerns sitting here on June 3rd about the cornerback spot. We have talked about Stephon Gilmore, whether he's going to come to Carolina or not. We're sitting here playing the waiting game and probably going to be playing the waiting game for a little bit more since OTAs are going to wrap up this week. The next week will be mandatory minicamp. Then they're going to have a 6-week hiatus. So I'm thinking that they're probably going to wait until maybe we get to training camp for that to happen. The good thing is Gilmore's around, but he's also coming off an injury. So it'll be interesting to see how all that works out for him here as far as his prospects coming to Carolina or elsewhere. But looking at Dane Jackson, right now he's penciled in as a starter opposite of J.C. Horn. He was more of the number 3 corner in Buffalo his first 4 years. And you go back to really 2022 when he had to start 14 games with Tre'Davious White was out. His PFF overall grade was 57.5, which isn't great. Coverage grade 59.9, run grade 47.9. So that's kind of concerning. He allowed 59% completion percentage that year, 82.1 passer rating, which is not bad, and then 10.9 missed tackle percentage. But last year, he was better. 62.7. That was his PFF overall grade. He was 71st of 127 corners. Coverage grade 69.7, 42nd at 126 corners. And then run defense grade was pretty bad. He was 120th out of 121 guys. Allowed 74% completion percentage, which was up from the previous year. 109.6 pass rating, which is also up, but he was playing. And he's playing less snaps too. 17.0% missed tackle rate. He's more of a guy that you would want to be your third corner, like he was in Buffalo. He's not somebody you're really wanting to be a starter, But right now, he's getting the opportunity to not just compete for the starting job, but to be the starter here in Carolina. So if that's going to be the case, we obviously need J.C. Horn to stay healthy, but also need Dane Jackson to be up for the job. And I don't know if he is, and I'm hoping that he's up for the task. Dan Morgan loved him, and he's here for a reason. I just look at the numbers, the role he played in Buffalo, and I just wonder if that really is the best fit for him here in Carolina. Maybe it is. It's not like it's a big contract, but still, that is concerning just based off of the past. But Dane Jackson, Josie Jewell, A'Shawn Robinson, those three names outside of course, Jadeveon Clowney, who I think need to make a big impact in Carolina for this defense to not completely fall off the face of the earth, which is possibly going to happen based off of what they lost this off season. Panthers making some big news, at least an announcement on Monday about the future of Bank of America Stadium. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app are actually going down the closer it gets to tip off with killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views in your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So if you are lucky enough to be in the Dallas area or in Boston and want to go check out the Celtics versus the Mavs, well, head over to Gametime, where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can see exactly where you're sitting. It's one of the best features that they have. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. It's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The future of Bank of America Stadium has been a topic of conversation for the last couple of years, and really since David Tepper came to Carolina as the Panthers owner. He has had many comments on the structure that they're sitting there on 800 South Mint Street in Uptown Charlotte, whether the bones were good enough, the place is going to fall down, all these kind of hyperbolic statements that he's made just to try to get the money of the hard-working people here in Charlotte, even though Tepper is worth $20.6 billion, according to Forbes. So we got some news about all this on Monday as the city of Charlotte unveiled a proposal to renovate Bank of America Stadium using tourism tax money. The city will share $650 million of it, while Tepper and his entertainment industry will pay $688 million. So in total, $1.3 billion renovation of Bank of America's Stadium. The city's portion of the money would come from the tourism taxes, specifically taxes on food and beverages, and a portion of occupancy taxes. That money needs to be spent on tourism-related projects. Again, Forbes estimates Tepper is worth a net worth of $20.6 billion. And there's always a debate of whether this is a good move for a city. Economists generally believe that local government subsidies of sports stadiums provide a poor return on investment because they generate little new economic activity. Instead, new is the important thing. Instead, the spending at stadiums and near restaurants and hotels is typically shifted from other spending. So this is going to get passed anyways. I'm looking at Charlotte Sports, or the Charlotte Business Ledger newsletter, which is a really good newsletter, by the way. They're expecting that the city council is going to agree to the renovations, of course. That's because they believe renovating costs less than building a new stadium, and a major source of the money, tourism taxes, is required to be spent on tourism-generating projects. They also don't want to risk losing what they consider to be an economic asset by having the Panthers move elsewhere. And with this, Panthers will be tied to the city for 20 more years. And it's one of those things where, I'm not trying to get political here. Well, this just kind of shows you the people who don't have a brain at all that are representing you in government when they think that an NFL team like the NFL, all the money that they're bringing in, Charlotte, how big the city has grown, all the industry that's here with Bank of America, with Truist, was Wells Fargo, seeing Honeywell move here, Lowe's. You really think that the NFL owners are going to vote for David Tepper to be able to move its team out of this city? Like, it's just idiotic, in my opinion. I've told y'all plenty of times, it's just why you sit here and you are concerned about the team going to move and yada. It's not going to happen. They're not going anywhere. The NFL is not going to let them leave Charlotte. We're not Greensboro. Love Greensboro, but come on. That's not going to happen. And Malcolm Graham, city council member, use your brain, buddy. They ain't going anywhere, whether you give them the money or not. Tepper can afford it, but this is something that was always going to happen. It's cool, I guess. Like, quite honestly, it's a stadium. I don't really care. Part of the renovations would be having a standing room only / patio section, which appears to be in the upper deck from the generation. The renderings? Yeah, renderings. The Panthers put out there on Monday. Also, there's not going to be a dome, which is something that David Tepper talked about he wanted, but then after the pandemic said he didn't want because he wanted to have an open air stadium. And also talk about how the weather is perfect here in Charlotte. And yeah, it makes sense. And also, if you think about it, Vegas, LA, they now have dome stadiums. You talk about events like the Super Bowl, like Final Four and all that. They're going to go to those cities before they're going to come to Charlotte. And we're going to build a dome stadium to have Final Four every 15 years or so, because San Antonio still gets Final Four. New Orleans still gets Final Four. Minnesota or Minneapolis does. You got, Indianapolis gets them pretty like every 5 years because the NCAA is there. And we'll see how long the NCAA even lasts. Dallas, there's a lot of places in the country that have dome stadiums if you really start to think about it. Phoenix. So it's big competition there. Not necessarily that big of a deal not to have it. And you look at what Miami has. Miami has a really beautiful stadium, and also they have great weather all the time, which is why they're able to host a Super Bowl because of the time of year it's being played. That's something that is, I'm sure, going to upset fans that they're not going to have a dome. I'm totally cool with the open air stadium. The exterior of the stadium will also be renovated as they want to have a park-like atmosphere with big LED screens for events, festivals, and watch parties, which sounds pretty cool as well. And all this is expected to take, if it's passed, which it will be, is expected to take place between 2025 and 2029. So the Panthers and Charlotte FC both will be tied to Charlotte for that period of time. And, Teppers, they have come in and they have increased the stadium events from 13 a year to 40, which is a positive thing, bringing in concerts. David Tepper telling us that we didn't have music before he came here. Now we have music, even though he didn't bring in Taylor Swift. So how good did you actually do? So replacing scoreboard for the first time since 2013, new sound system, upper level standing room only sections / patio, new concessions, all that good stuff. That's what's expected. Now, one thing too, when the city believes that it would be cheaper to do this instead of building a new stadium. So a study that the Tennessee Titans did on Nissan Stadium there in Nashville, it claimed that it would cost $1.9 billion for the Titans to renovate. The Panthers renovation project, according to Joe Bruno on this tweet, is about $800 million, $650 million from Charlotte City Council, even though it's part of a $1.3 billion. The Titans, that's what Charlotte business letters are at least saying. The Titans ultimately opted for a new $2.1 billion stadium with $1.3 billion from the public. So, yeah, that's interesting. I'm not going to be spending as much as Nashville, but also Nashville is kind of, I don't know. It is what it is. So, yeah, new stadium renovations are happening. That's cool. And I guess we're going to be paying for it and all that. So, yeah, cool. I mean, I don't care. Just they're going to talk about it because it's happening with the Panthers. But, yeah, they're going to renovate the stadium, a place that is in our city. Cool. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you follow or listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me right now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, and I will talk to you guys on Wednesday. Oh, yeah, of course, keep pounding.